Hey, y'all, it's Brandon Adams, the host of DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Marco's Pizza. You know, it's a little cold here in the state of Georgia. I got my tailgate apparel sweatshirt on today to kind of stay nice and warm and toasty, and we're glad you're with us. If you're sort of staying away from the wind and relatively miserable April conditions, well, we'll hopefully have a fun show for you. Chip Towers later on. Georgia held a scrimmage on Saturday. Chip will tell us all about that. Also, a little salty version of Kirby Smart. We'll begin the show with that. And later on, I've also got some great announcements about everything that's going to be happening for us this week as we head towards the spring game on Saturday. It is all on the way next as DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, begins right now.
From DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Marco's Pizza. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
All right, coming up in about 30 minutes on our broadcast today, many of you have been asking about everything that's going to be kind of going on for us this week as we head towards the spring game on Saturday. We're obviously excited about it all, and we're going to tell you about it. So if you can, stay with us for the full show here today, because about 30 minutes from right now, I'm going to tell you about events this week. Huge day for us on Saturday, both before the game and after the game. Some fun and surprises kind of in store for that, and a chance for you to be, well, a big winner here, walk away with some stuff from DawgNation. So we'll tell you all about that here about 30 minutes from right now. Before we get to that, though, a little salty version of Kirby Smart on Saturday. I guess this is to be expected. You know, we've been going through these rigors of spring now for quite some time, and I think that, you know, like a lot of us, you know, you have that sort of busy season at work or that sort of, tiring time, and, nerves get a little frayed, a little irritated by the end. And maybe that's kind of what's going on with Kirby Smart here, because on Saturday there was a brief media viewing period before the official scrimmage began, and as the erstwhile Chip Towers, the folks that cover Georgia practice, they're going to be out there trying to see who all's there, pay attention to anybody that might be missing. And one of the guys that or the guy that was not seen by the media during this period was Georgia linebacker Natrez Patrick. And by now you know the backstory on Patrick, the stuff that happened in December, the stuff that happened before that, a little bit of the aftermath of the December arrest. And so obviously it raised a bit of an eyebrow when Patrick is not seen there. Kirby Smart was asked about that when the scrimmage was done, when he met with the media, and Kirby was a little irritated by the fact that this had been reported before he had a chance to talk about it. Here's what Kirby said about it.
Natrez had a funeral to go to, guys, and I think there's a large overreaction there. I mean, I think you guys went a little overboard on that, So I think the best thing is just to come in here and ask, and we'll fill you in. He got there 12 minutes after y'all left and scrimmaged the whole day.
Listen, I'm a Georgia fan, obviously, so I certainly love and respect Kirby Smart, but I'm going to have to stick up for my media brethren on this one. This notion that Kirby says, hey, if you want to know something about Natrez Patrick, just come ask me. I'll tell you everything you want to know. Don't get ahead of yourself in terms of what you report. We all know that's ludicrous. We all know that Kirby Smart uses secrecy as a weapon from time to time, and there's been a little bit of secrecy, here and there when it comes to the Natrez Patrick thing. So, listen, is Kirby Smart within, his rights to sort of play his cards close to the vest on certain issues? He might be, but it's a little bit disingenuous when you do use that to your advantage from time to time to then sort of turn around and play the opposite side of that coin, which is, hey, if y'all want to know about Natrez Patrick, all you got to do is ask. Well, people have been asking plenty about Natrez Patrick. They haven't always gotten the answers they were looking to get, including just a few minutes later on that same subject in the press conference. It's never been officially stated if Natrez Patrick is sort of back as a full-fledged member of this team, capable of being eligible right away, first game of the year, G-Day. That's not really been specifically laid out, and media does try to get a little bit more specificity from Kirby Smart on that subject. And Kirby Smart also a little testy about this too, really not wanting to go there yet.
You guys are amazing, man. I mean, Natrez is working as hard as he can to do everything right and do everything we ask. We'll worry about that when the time comes. Right now, we're worried about practice on Tuesday with Natrez after today. Just like today, we were worried about today. Why do we have to worry about that? We're worried about what's important right now. And what's important right now is Natrez's growth and development, and he becomes a better man and a better person. We're trying to help him every way we can. So we're going to go out there and worry about practice Tuesday, not G-Day or the first game.
So I think that Kirby Smart is absolutely right when he says, as the head coach of the team, that's what he's worried about, that he's not ready to look toward or talk about Natrez's availability for G-Day or Natrez Patrick's availability for the first game of the season against Austin Peay, which frankly is probably less of a challenge than G-Day, but that's a different conversation for a different day. He's not ready to kind of go there yet. He's still trying to work on developing Natrez as a person and getting him better as a player, and as the head coach of the team, that's probably what Kirby Smart's job is supposed to be. However, for people that do what I do for a living and the people that I connect with every single day, Georgia fans do have legitimate questions about Natrez Patrick, not just solely about Patrick, but how he fits into a linebacking core for the moment at Georgia that does have some questions. You know, last year Georgia was paced by the Butkus Award winner, Roquan Smith. You can't get much better than what Roquan was in 2017, and does Georgia have the kind of answer to that in 2018? And could Natrez Patrick potentially be that? That's why eyebrows are going to be raised and people are going to notice when Natrez Patrick doesn't go through practice. In fact, on Saturday when the scrimmage was over with, Kirby Smart spoke to the media a little bit more about that situation at linebacker, saying that, yeah, they're trying to get Patrick involved there, but he's not the only guy. They're trying to work in there in that spot. They're actually trying a lot of guys out to be the so-called, quote, maybe next Roquan. Here's more from Kirby.
Monty plays it, Juwan plays it, Tay gets in there and plays it, Nate McBride plays it, and Jaden plays it. They all go in there and play. So you guys want to speculate, is he with the ones, is he with the twos, is he this? Guys, we're practicing everybody at linebacker. We're preparing to go forward so that we can develop all our young players. Just like when the two guys we signed get here, we're going to give them a lot of reps too.
The two guys that signed, they're not there yet. He's obviously referencing Quay Walker and Channing Tindall, so we'll see how they play out there. But in terms of all those guys that Kirby Smart just mentioned, obviously a healthy, fully functioning, ready-to-go Natrez Patrick is certainly a much better option, a more seasoned, experienced player than any of the ones that he just mentioned. And it sounds like it's kind of good news that Patrick's absence in practice wasn't for anything other than just having to go to a family member's funeral or a close person's funeral. I certainly send out well wishes to Natrez Patrick, who's having to go through that. Obviously, Patrick is a big part of what potentially could happen with the Georgia linebacking core this season. But the other name that Kirby Smart kind of mentions there for a moment is Tay Crowder, who became a bit of a hero and a part of Georgia folklore forever for not something he did as a linebacker, but for something that he did on special teams going back to the Rose Bowl when he fielded the squib kick that ultimately led to the historic Rodrigo Blankenship field goal that led to the Georgia comeback and the win there against Oklahoma in the Rose Bowl. Georgia fans have a soft spot in their heart forever for Tay Crowder, and it sounds like he's also impressing Kirby Smart a little bit for the work that he's doing as a converted linebacker. Maybe a guy, as Kirby just said there, that could be in the mix. Here's a little more on that subject with also a little sprinkle of concern for just how much Georgia needs somebody to step up in that inside linebacker role.
He's come a long way, and he's still not there. It just tells you how far he had to go. I mean, I've known Tay, as long as I've known Terry and those guys. They all came over to Alabama camp from the west side of Georgia for a long time. I've known Tay since he was 8th, 9th grade and was a receiver. He's gotten more contact tough. He enjoys contact. He's an extremely good athlete for a big man. I mean, he's got one of the largest wingspans on our team. But he's still, I mean, you miss all those years of playing linebacker and seeing things naturally. But he's growing. I'm glad we made the move because he's come so far. But he's still got to keep continuing to get better. I mean, that's the position that at inside backer that we have no dominant player. We have no clear head and shoulders above the rest linebacker guy. So it's like we want somebody to stick out. We want there to be a alpha male that kind of leads the whole defense and dominates. But that hasn't happened yet. But Tay has been improving every day.
I love that description there from Kirby Smart, the idea of an alpha male, someone that sort of sticks out at that inside linebacker position. That is clearly what you need. It's clearly what you want. That's what Roquan Smith was a year ago, and I think the best candidate to be that guy in 2018 is probably Natrez Patrick. He's more experienced than the younger players. He's more talented than many of the guys there in that group, and because of that, you're going to continue to get a lot of questions about Natrez Patrick. The good news for Georgia fans so far, though, is those questions have all been sort of answered in a positive way. It sounds like Natrez is really taking seriously the challenge of working his way back and being a big part of this team here in 2018. That's what I expect to happen. But one more example of Kirby Smart being salty from the other side of the ball. You just heard their little irritation about questions involving Natrez Patrick and what people were saying about that. How about the other side of the ball? Last week here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, we played you some audio of Georgia tight end Isaac Nada saying, you know what? maybe the tight ends do get more involved in the offense this year. After all, Jim Chaney, the offensive coordinator, is working as the tight ends coach. Well, Kirby Smart was asked about that. Does A equal B here, that there are more catches the tight ends now because of Chaney's involvement? And this was about as upset as I've heard Kirby about a question maybe in a long time here. You even get the sort of the Nick Saban pound the table style answer. Listen to Kirby not liking the tight end line of questioning.
I am so tired of the tight end questions. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't know if they've called it more or less. The end line for me is, how many points do we score? To me, when they chart you on offense, they say, how many points do you score? So if they give us like 14 points for Isaac Nada to catch a touchdown, we'll start throwing it to him more. All right, if we get 21 points for Charlie to catch one, I promise you we'll design a play to get a 21-point play. But right now we're just trying to score points, and if that includes tight ends, that's great. Do I think our tight ends have caught more balls this spring? Probably so, because we've thrown the ball more this spring than we have in the past. But tight ends have to be a matchup disaster. Charlie had a big catch today. Isaac Nada had a big catch today. So I don't know if they're being targeted more or if they're getting open more. But a lot of it has to do with what that GPS number is, which is how fast they're running.
I mean, I think this is obviously a really interesting response from Kirby. As I said, you almost get like the Nick Saban style pound the table with the fist. It doesn't do that a ton. He sort of did that right there. But this is another issue where, people are going to ask a lot of questions about these tight ends because, Nada was a former 5-star prospect coming out of high school. And Charlie Warner, UGA legacy, very high 4-star prospect when he was coming out of high school. They've both shown some flashes of being that kind of player here at Georgia. And there's obviously a curiosity and maybe a desire among Georgia fans to see them sort of fully live up to all their potential there. As I've said before, though, Georgia's not going to run a million plays a game, so there's not going to be enough footballs for everybody to sort of go around and get as many touches as they want, but Georgia's got some really good players there at that tight end position. That's why some of these questions come around. Ultimately, I think, the response here to the saltiness from Kirby Smart is, sort of general forgiveness. Like I said, it's a long spring. He's dealt with the media a lot here the last few weeks. You're trying to go through practice and get better, and sometimes nerves can be frayed along the way. I think what it all leads to, though, is a pretty spirited G-Day for Georgia fans on Saturday. A chance to see a lot of these players on display, maybe. A chance to see a version of Georgia football in 2018 that could follow up pretty well on the SEC championship from a year ago. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, and we are presented by Marco's Pizza. Good to have you with us, whether you watch us on video, 10 a.m. DawgNation Facebook or YouTube page, on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, or anywhere podcasts can be found, Apple Podcasts, Android devices, SoundCloud, the world-famous DawgNation.com. We're just really glad you found DawgNation Daily today, and really glad we're presented by Marco's Pizza. And speaking of Marco's, on Friday night, my wife had to work late. She works and does a great job there, and every now and then you have to work a little late. Friday night was an example of that. So the dinner plans completely changed. The kids, I have 2 young ones, in a total panic. What are we going to do for dinner? Well, Daddy did the only thing he knows to do, which is pick up the phone and dial Marco's Pizza. And, a few minutes later, we got hot, fresh, authentic Italian pizza from Marco's there. And let me tell you something. Everybody in the family was very happy because of it, and I was happy too. Really thankful for Marco's there, and you'll be thankful yourself when you check them out. Right now, they got a special offer for you. Marco's wants you to meet the boss of all cheese pizzas. You can get the big cheese. It's a blend of 5 different cheeses, and the extra large right now, just $10.99. Check it out at the Marco's closest to you, and you'll be just as happy with Marco's Pizza as I have been. We're glad to have them on DawgNation Daily, and looking forward to having Chip Towers on the program in a moment. We'll kind of get more into detail with him on the issues with Natrez Patrick and the Georgia tight ends and kind of everything else that kind of go along there. We will get into that coming up in a couple of moments here on DawgNation Daily. Before that, though, let me squeeze in a couple other things here. First of all, it was another one of these Nike Open qualifiers over the weekend. This one in Charlotte. Our buddy Nate was there, I believe. Nate was there. A lot of times when you see the video that we put together, Nate, who's working with us today on DawgNation Daily presented by Marco's Pizza, he's one of the guys that shoots that and does all of that. And he had a chance to see Owen Papo, who I guess now wants to be called, he's corrected us in the pronunciation here, it's Owen Papo, correct? And Owen showed out in a big way on over the weekend, Nate. Is that right? Big show out. Nate shaking his head on that. Big performance from Owen Papo on that. We're going to have more on that subject on Before the Hedges to 9, presented by Kroger. Jeff Sintel was there and saw it. In fact, Jeff had a chance to check in with Owen a bit on some of the numbers that he put up there at the opening qualifier there in Charlotte. Here is some of what Owen told Jeff about the performance performance that he had.
What kind of scores did you get today?
40, 447, shuffle, 4 flat, 45 on the power ball, and then 40 vertical.
40 vertical. So what's your height and weight did you test?
Height, weight, 6 foot, 210.
Is there any specific score you want to get out of this?
I just want to get open. That's it.
Well, listen, I think he's doing more than getting open. I think he's making a huge name for himself, not just this year, but really the last couple years, these kind of recruiting events. He's putting up huge numbers, and he's getting a lot of attention for Georgia fans. Obviously, it was initially supposed to be Cinco de Popo. That was the great nickname given to what was originally supposed to be the May 5th announcement date for Owen Popo and his college decision. That's now been moved up, as Jeff Sintel reported at DawgNation.com yesterday. That's now been moved up to May 1st. It's a different date now for Owen Popo. The choice here would still seem to be between Georgia and Auburn when it comes down to the five-star linebacker here, and I make no bones about this. I think that Popo would be a huge get for Georgia. I think he's a critical player of need for the 2019 class. Even if he does choose Auburn on May 1st, which there's obviously been some scuttlebutt about, I don't think this is over for him. I think Georgia's going to keep working through the month of December to make this happen, but ultimately this is going to be a big recruitment to watch for 2019. And the initial, sort of the next domino to fall here, that commitment decision, not going down on the 5th, now going down on May 1st. We'll have more about this coming up on Before the Hedges tonight. It's presented by Kroger. I'm actually sitting in for Hannah Chalker on that program tonight, so we'll talk some recruiting with Jeff Sintel tonight on the DawgNation various video channels. For now, though, here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, let's turn our attention back to the current Bulldogs. Let's talk some spring practice with Chip Towers. It's good to have you with us, too.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Of course, we'll say hello to Chip Towers, doing a great job all weekend long, covering what was a busy spring scrimmage for Georgia on Saturday. And we'll kind of get into some of the audio we were just hearing from Kirby Smart a moment ago about what he said about Natrez Patrick, what he said about the tight ends there. But before that, Chip, if you don't mind, let me start with this. You know, Kirby issued some challenges about the defensive line, sort of expressed some concerns about, lack of depth there. But it sounds like he was a little more complimentary of that group coming off the scrimmage on Saturday. Sounds like they stopped the run a little bit better. I guess if you're a Georgia fan, you probably take that as good news, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, you'll take whatever you can get at this point. I mean, there's no question, Brandon. I'm sure you've talked about it, every week in this forum. The Georgia's front seven is going to be a question until you get out there and battle an opponent, Saturday to Saturday. I mean, it's just too much of a talent loss to not think that there would be a little bit of a drop off there. And then, as we're seeing even in the spring, depth is an issue. You lose a player or two when you have such a small number, and it can severely impact your ability to play at a high level. I mean, last year, if you look at Georgia's defensive line, they were a battalion. They were coming in and out in waves, and even though you just lost a couple of guys that were frontline players, you still, your total number is down, and that's going to be an issue all year long, I would imagine.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting just to follow up on that. I guess the practice report from DawgNation over the weekend said that DeQuan Hawkins-Muckle was working some with the first team there, and I guess that Tyler Clark was at least visibly working some with the second team. Is this just the sort of typical shuffling that goes on during practice, or is there something to that maybe?
No, I mean, I don't think there's anything. Look, DeQuan Hawkins-Muckle is an interesting guy. I mean, he's a guy who played a whole lot as a sophomore and just didn't play as much last season. And they play different positions, Tyler Clark and DeQuan Hawkins-Muckle. He's pretty much a pure nose guard. And what happened to him was just that John Atkins really distinguished himself as Georgia's nose guard and just took the lion's share of repetitions at that position last year, and John Atkins is gone. So, Hawkins-Muckle is going to have to step in there and take a lot of those reps. And as a senior, I would imagine, that he's expecting to, and Georgia is expecting him to. He's a good player who has a lot of experience. Obviously, his highlight last year is blocking that field goal against Auburn in the SEC championship game. But he's a good down-to-down guy. His problem, it sounds like, according to Kirby, has mostly been, conditioning and those guys play really, really big, and he's apparently down to about 305 pounds, which is Kirby told him, if you're not under 310, you're not playing, and so that's what he's dealing with. I think as long as he's able to meet those guidelines that Kirby and the coaching staff have given to him, Trey Scott, that he'll be just fine. I think he's a pretty good player, and so is Julian Rochester.
I think there's some kind of interesting drama also. Kirby Smart kind of publicly challenged Richard LeCount, who I think of as a potential future star. I like his demeanor. I think I like his game, at least based on what I've seen about it. It sounds like also based on what Kirby said on Saturday, LeCount responded pretty well to that too, even giving some of the media brethren some credit there for maybe spurring him on a little bit. I think LeCount's going to be eventually a good player for Georgia. It's kind of interesting to see some of this play out publicly in terms of LeCount being challenged, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, Kirby admits it now and then. He sends messages through the media to players, and LeCount falls in the category I've seen of a lot of players over the years. Some players are great practice players. Some aren't. And based on what we've been hearing from Kirby, I think LeCount may fall into the latter, but he's also one of those guys, and this has been a long history with him, and why he became a 5-star prospect is when the lights are on, the kid plays great. It comes down to, he's fast, he has ball instincts. He was a terrific, offensive player and kick returner at Liberty County High School, and so he can really turn it on, and so. When Kirby's talking about, when I hear things like, he loses focus and that, you know what, I would probably lose focus in spring practice. I'm sure I probably would. It gets boring and repetitious for these guys. But, it is a serious business, and you got to be paying attention and knowing what you're doing. And I would imagine that he got Richard's attention with those comments, and he'll probably attempt to be much more focused. But, as you know, Brandon, it's not about what you do in practice. If he can get on the field and prove himself to be the player that we all believe him to be, I think he'll be just fine.
Something else that got some attention was the brief absence from Natrez Patrick from practice there as well. We kind of had some fun with this on the show before you joined us, that obviously this is going to get some attention, and Kirby Smart maybe a little saltiness there due to the fact that it's coming close to the end of spring. But it sounds like the good news here is that everything's all fine and worked out. Patrick's still doing what he needs to be doing, and we don't know for sure yet if he's playing on G-Day, but it sounds like Patrick is still a big part of what's happening here with this linebacking core, right?
Yeah, that's kind of the problem with not really defining what it is that Natrez Patrick is facing with regard to the season and eligibility and all that. And Kirby, which is his right, wants to keep that in house or whatever. But when he's not there, he's a frontline player, and he wasn't there. Number 6 is not on the field, so with everything kind of up in the air. You gotta make note of that, and the way it is now. We issue these practice reports live because we see 8 minutes during the early part of practice, and then we don't talk to Kirby Smart for a couple hours later. So it's one of those situations that it is what it is. We have a job to do. Kirby has a job to do, and sometimes they don't run parallel with each other all the time. But the bottom line is, Natrez was late. He got there later. He was at a funeral. Everything is still well and good. He's been practicing the whole spring. And, Natrez Patrick is the best linebacker Georgia has. So if and when he plays is important to, I think, Georgia's bottom line is how well they're able to play this season. And we're not going to know that, whether he missed the last 2 games of the year, whether that was actually a suspension or not. You really don't know if you can even call that. But 6 games last year due to suspension. Will there be more in 2018? We won't know. And based on the way Kirby's handling it, we probably won't know until we reach those actual games and see whether number 6 is on the field or not.
Well, I think that's all well said, Chip. And as you know, Kirby Smart said it himself that they're looking for that alpha male to emerge in that inside linebacking core for 2018. Obviously, it was Roquan Smith a year ago. When I look at the current roster, even with the guys that are coming in, listen, Quay Walker and Channing Tindall may be fire-breathing dragons eventually, but they're going to be, true freshmen here in 2018. The best candidate to be that guy, I do think, is Natrez Patrick. That's why there's going to be a lot of interest in him this spring.
Yeah, exactly. He's really the only experienced guy back there. certainly Monty Rice got on the field a good bit, especially for a freshman. But he wasn't taking a lot of the 11-on-11 defensive reps, and there's nothing to substitute for game experience. And what the way I always point to on this is with Roquan Smith. I mean, it took Roquan a while to get going, and that guy's a Buckets Award winner. So it was really the latter half of his sophomore season after he had been on the field, starting for 6-7 games in a row before he really started to distinguish himself. And he has, we all know now, he has all the athletic ability in the world. That's a complicated position. There's a lot of reads that you got to make there. You really got to know what you're doing. So it's not as simple as just being big and fast. There's a lot more to it. But I think Georgia's recruited well at the position between the guys they got here and the guys they're still going after. And but Natrez Patrick's going to be your best option whenever you can get him on the field.
So on the other side of the ball here, it sounds like DeAndre Swift dealing with a little bit of a growing situation. He's doing some practicing, but in terms of like the G-Day scrimmage, the chance of him getting a lot of carries may not be that great. That's probably a little bit of a disappointment for fans, Chip. He's obviously one of the stars in this team right now, but it's actually a pretty good evaluation opportunity for Georgia, is it not? More carries for Brian Harrigan, more carries for Elijah Holyfield. These could be primary ball carrier type guys along with Swift in that first game against Austin Peay, and it's a pretty nice dress rehearsal for these both Harrigan and Holyfield on G-Day, correct?
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest about it. That's what spring is all about. As much as you want to put on a show, either for your fans or for recruits in spring practice, it's all about getting ready to play and finding out who you have and what you have. And let's face it, Georgia knows what they have in DeAndre Swift, as they do, a lot of other players. And so, the good news, bad news of all that is you're probably not going to see a lot of your marquee players for a long time, during the G-Day game, because you just don't want to expose them to injury risk in that type of an atmosphere. So, you're going to see a lot of backup guys, but, in the running back situation, you definitely need to find out what you have behind DeAndre Swift. I think Elijah Holyfield, he looks really, really good. Looks like he's really come into his own. And, you're probably going to see a lot of him and Brian Harrigan, and you probably see a lot of Prather Hudson, too, and some of those other guys they have in the backfield. But, it's a long-term, safety is kind of the primary issue here, and I'm sure they'll be very careful with DeAndre. But it doesn't sound like it's a really serious thing, so if they can get him out there on the field, I'm sure they will, but don't be surprised if they don't.
Let me ask you another kind of open-ended question about G-Day. I'm just sort of curious of your thoughts. What else do you expect to see? My guess would be, for instance, that Justin Fields is not going to fall flat on his face. I'm not telling you he's going to outplay Jake Fromm, but it sounds like this moment's probably not going to be too big for him based on some of what your reporting has been thus far. Anything else you're sort of expecting to see from the G-Day atmosphere and environment on Saturday?
Well, I do expect to see Justin Fields play and play well. I mean, I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday about this. I don't think I've ever been to a spring game where the new young hot shot backup didn't play really well. Just going back forever. You remember Jacob Eason a couple of years ago played really well in the spring game, yep. and then of course Jake Fromm last year played really, really well. I mean, it helps that they don't allow contact on the quarterback. That helps you stand back there and look a lot better. But, I remember DJ Shockley played great. Eric Zier just blew up everybody. He was one of the first early enrollees that we saw in college football, and he came in there in Georgia's spring game, and I guess that would have been, 1991, and Greg Talley was the starter, and Eric Zier came in there and was throwing darts, and, everybody got really excited about it. And I would imagine that's going to be the case with Justin Fields. I mean, there's nothing not to like about this guy. 6'3", 225. His arm is for real. Just working on accuracy and play calling, play operation. And I'm sure whatever script they're going to have for spring practice is going to be one where he looks really, really good. So I expect that. I'm excited about seeing seeing Justin Fields, seeing some of the young receivers. I think that's an important aspect. You referred to the defensive line, but the secondary, I mean,
Yeah.
we're going to be feverishly writing down, who's lining up at cornerback, who's lining up at safety, because that's Georgia's got a lot of makeover to do at that position, and so G-Day will be the first chance to really sit there and see how those guys look in some live action.
Let me get ready to wrap up with this subject. We also played some audio earlier of Kirby Smart sort of pushing back against some questions about tight end usage, and he makes the point that, it's about, scoring points no matter who's collecting the catches and the touchdowns, and nobody can dispute that. But there are a lot of Georgia fans who've asked questions about that tight end usage. Will we see more from Nada? Will we see more from Charlie Werner? And it seems like, Chip, Kirby sort of gives a different answer on this depending on when he's asked. Back last year during the season, he said they weren't catching balls because they weren't being physical enough. And on Saturday, it sort of sounded like he was saying that they've got to be matchup nightmares. They've got to do more to get open. It seems like that he's given different answers over the course of time as to why the tight ends haven't gotten more catches. Do you agree with my assessment of that it's sort of a slightly different answer depending on when this question's asked?
Well, I think what Kirby ultimately doesn't want to say is that Kirby and his offensive philosophy, and at the end of the day, it is the head coach's offensive philosophy, doesn't utilize the tight ends quite as much in the passing game. I mean, just go back and look at Alabama for the last decade. Every once in a while you would see a game when Alabama tight ends would break out, and usually it's kind of a spring-loaded surprise, that they would pull out. I remember the national championship game, Kirby's last year when that tight end went crazy for Alabama. But the number one job of a tight end, really in any offense, but especially in Georgia's offense, is to block. Now, they have to receive, but that's part of the job, but it's never going to be the primary job, not under this regime at different times. I mean, Jim Donnan threw the tight end a lot, Mark Richt, at different times. It depends on your personnel, certainly, utilize the tight end a great deal in the game. Now, there's always going to be plays for the tight end. There's always going to be an option. There's always going to be a read. I think in Charlie Warner, there's no question. In Charlie Warner and Isaac Nauta, Georgia has two of the best, but, Kirby's not going to come out there and say that their primary job is for blocking, because that doesn't help recruiting any, right? I mean, he's, so I think he's legitimately tired of that question and a lot of questions. It's late in the spring, we're 12 practices in, the next one will be 13. He's gotten to meet with the media now about 8 times, and that's about 7 times more than he'd probably like to, but but I think that's what we're dealing with here more than anything else.
Well, Chip, we appreciate you being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza. Always a fun conversation. Looking forward to a lot of your great coverage this week, Saturday in the stadium included, and we'll talk to you later on here on the program.
See you, pal.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, y'all, don't forget SEC Country Live, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, SEC Country Facebook and YouTube pages this afternoon. Look forward to talking to a bunch of SEC stuff then. I'm going to do some SEC Through content here in a moment. Let me take a moment before we get there to sort of lay out the week for us here a little bit. I'm going to try to make sure that I hit that all. Let me start, as I record this on a Monday, with tomorrow, 6 to 8 p.m., we're going to be back at Marlowe's in Brookhaven this time for a very special Marlowe's Big Game preview, looking ahead to the spring game on Saturday. Now, here's the cool thing about tomorrow night, Marlowe's in Brookhaven. We're actually going to do a big giveaway. A lot of you that were not able to come to DawgNation Appreciation were saying, hey, how do I get one of those DawgNation Appreciation T-shirts? Well, the good news here is this week we're going to try to give away a lot of DawgNation Appreciation T-shirts, including tomorrow night. Even if you came to DawgNation Appreciation, we're not going to scan your forehead here to see if you've already gotten one. We'll give you another DawgNation Appreciation T-shirt, or if you weren't able to come there, the DawgNation Appreciation T-shirt were really well received, really cool. They were a gift to everyone that came to a DawgNation Appreciation back in March. For those that can come to a Marlowe's Brookhaven tomorrow night, we are going to give one of those out to everybody there as well. So really good opportunity tomorrow night from 6 to 8 p.m. to preview the spring game on Saturday. It's our Marlowe's Big Game preview, and everyone who comes gets a DawgNation Appreciation T-shirt. I'm really excited about that. Then, for us on Saturday, a big event before the game and a big event after the game. Let me start with before the game. DawgNation going to be live at Bulldog Park, which is 655 Hancock Industrial Way, Athens, Georgia. 655 Hancock Industrial Way, Athens, Georgia. We're going to be there from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. This is not a broadcast. This is only an on-site opportunity to hang out with DawgNation there as well. We're going to have a DawgNation appreciation T-shirts there to give you. So if you're in the Athens area, you want to come by and see us before the game, from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., we're going to be live at Bulldog Park, which is a really cool, for your motorhome. For the folks that have the RVs, you're looking for a place to park yours, you're looking for a lot, you can kind of call your own. Bulldog Park is a great spot for that, and they are going to be hosting us from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Bulldog Park has also told us this, some special guests on hand. From 11:15 to 11:45 that morning, Bulldog Park is telling us that David Green, the former Georgia quarterback, going to be on hand. From 12 until 12:30, Green's college teammate David Pollock expected to be there from 12 until 12:30. And then Kevin Butler, the great former UGA kicker, the College Football Hall of Famer, he's going to be there from 1:30 until 2 p.m. That's all going to be taking place at Bulldog Park, which is a really cool RV lot, a great motorhome piece of land, beautiful property where motorhomes park for game day, 655 Hancock Industrial Way. I look forward to seeing you there from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Saturday, giving away some DawgNation appreciation T-shirts. And then after the game, we'll be back live at the Bookstore for the post-game show. I cannot tell you this yet, but we have a very special guest for the post-game show. In addition to myself and, of course, Jeff Sintel being a big part of that, we have a very special guest, too. Hope to be able to tell you more about that tomorrow, but it's going to be a huge, huge edition. Biggest post-game show we've ever done. We're going to do it from the Bookstore, the UGA Bookstore, right across the street from the stadium. There after the game, I'm going to have more on the UGA Bookstore here also coming up before we're done here today as well. But I need to do a little SEC through talk. Let me sort of see if I can rattle through some of these SEC topics. But we have a lot going on Saturday, a lot going on this week. I look forward to seeing you as much of it as we possibly can. Of course, the Florida game goes down this past weekend, paling in comparison to all the festivities that take place in Georgia. They were proud of the $50,000 or so they got in the building. It seemed like they were happy with Felipe Franks, the quarterback's performance. I think overall here, this was a game designed to make Florida look fun again. For Gators fans, this probably worked. I think that we'll probably take more of a critical eye of it in terms of what went down there. But clearly, in terms of putting a big commercial forward for the program, I think you at least have to give Florida credit for this. It probably did better than Auburn, South Carolina. These other SEC teams have taken their shot. I think the Florida spring game comes across looking bigger and better than any of the other SEC versions so far this year. It is worth pointing out, though, they had fewer announced folks in the stands than what Florida State apparently had in Tallahassee. Over at Alabama, a couple quarterback pieces of news here. Apparently there's a little bit of an injury setback for Tua Tagovailoa, who has been practicing. We'll have more on this on SEC Country Live later on this afternoon. But for now, I think the idea of seeing Tua play in the spring game for Alabama on Saturday, that seems unlikely to occur. Nick Saban has a good, moment here this spring. We'll find out for ourselves with our own eyes when the Tide does it in Tuscaloosa on Saturday how true this really is. Does he look like a better quarterback going into his third year? We'll be able to see that with our own eyes. A couple other stories to get to here. I thought that Ross Tucker, the NFL analyst, I thought his tweet on Friday about Reuben Foster, who has gotten into some domestic violence trouble with San Francisco 49ers, was really interesting. We're going to talk more about this, obviously, later on this afternoon. But I think this is a criticism that sticks to Alabama just a bit. A guy that apparently never got in trouble at Alabama, has done nothing but get in trouble since going on to the NFL. What's really going on here? That's, I think, a fair question worth asking. And another sort of utterance of this issue that I think is a little bit of a troubling thing for Tennessee. Tommy Tuberville, the former SEC coach, goes on the radio program there on WJOX in Birmingham and was talking about Tennessee and, talking about how, Philip Fulmer, the athletic director, is going to be a help to Jeremy Pruitt. In the midst of doing that, describes Pruitt as a head coach in training. I mean, the last thing you want as a major SEC program is this viewpoint that your coach has training wheels on him, that he's somehow, only an apprentice to the real coach, which is somehow Philip Fulmer, who's the athletic director here. I think that's a tough label to try to attach to Jeremy Pruitt. I think the Vols have got to do everything they can to sort of shake that off. I think this is a really interesting comment from Tuberville, and potentially an interesting problem for Tennessee. We'll deal with that more on SEC Country Live later on this afternoon. For now, we'll make that your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, let me go back to a moment ago what Chip Towers was just talking about when he joined us in the program, the fact that DeAndre Swift, who we know as Georgia's #1 running back, and we think that's probably true even if Zamir White becomes fully healthy. We think the experienced Swift is probably still the guy for Georgia, and the competition for who is various partners, the number 2 option, the number 3 option. We think that for the most part is wide open right now. We may not see Swift on G-Day, though, and as Chip kind of pointed out, that's not really what G-Days are for. The sure things, you don't need to see them out there in harm's way. Let's find out some more about some guys we're honestly curious about. One of those guys, I think, for a lot of fans is still Elijah Holyfield. Holyfield is a guy that's incredibly popular. He's a big-time 4-star recruit from the state, but he also has that famous last name. Georgia fans want to see more from Holyfield, and they want to see him have a clearly defined spot, a clearly defined role for this team in 2018. I think that's going to happen. I think the opportunity is still wide open for him. Also, Brian Harry and the other Georgia running backs. I think there's still plenty to be said for all of these guys here, but Holyfield in particular is a name that we get a lot of questions about here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza. So therefore, when Kirby Smart spoke to the media on Thursday, I thought it was kind of interesting that he gave some kind of nice compliments to Elijah Holyfield, a guy that seems to be growing here, even going into his 3rd year at the program. Interesting stuff from Kirby on Elijah Holyfield.
He's a workhorse. He's a tough guy. He's physical. He's extremely competitive. I thought he grew up his 2nd year because he contributed on special teams. His 1st year, I don't think he knew how to contribute on special teams. But he's developed as a special teams player. He gained confidence through the special teams, and now that's carried over into his offense and carrying the ball. Like you said, he got some carries last year and some mop-up duty. But he's a physical, tough guy, one of my favorite competitors out there. He's got to pass pro better. He's got to work on it, and that's been a big emphasis for him. But I'm excited to see where he goes. He's had some really good, tough runs this spring.
It is not a surprise to hear that Elijah Holyfield has had some, as Kirby Smart describes it, they are really good, tough runs. We've all had some fun with some of the pictures that have popped up from Holyfield here this spring. The biceps just bursting out of the uniform. This guy that looks like a professional wrestler. I mean, he is in incredible physical condition. I would imagine that he is a load to try to tackle, and I would expect him to sort of put that on full display on G-Day on Saturday. You start sort of formulating some predictions of some of the stuff that you think might happen. My guess is on Monday here in our program, we may actually be hearing from a lot of UGA fans who are pretty impressed with what they saw from Elijah Holyfield. I'm certainly looking forward to seeing him and really seeing what this Georgia offense looks like during that game. By the way, speaking of Saturday, as I mentioned a moment ago, we're looking forward to being back at the UGA Bookstore for our post-game show on Saturday. And don't forget, the Bookstore is busy all weekend long. On Friday from 5 to 7 p.m., former Georgia quarterback Aaron Murray going to be there signing autographs. Those are $10. They include a picture. Saturday, 10 a.m., Nick Chubb there signing autographs. That runs until noon. Those autographs are $40. You also get the picture there on that. Then you've also got Lorenzo Carter, Isaiah Wynn signing autographs from 12:30 till 2:30. So busy weekend of autographs there at the UGA Bookstore. And y'all also know that I love the UGA Bookstore for the apparel that they sell. A lot of the stuff that I like, including the Tommy Bahama, the Vineyard Vines, the Southern Tide, it is there at the UGA Bookstore. Also, they're the exclusive home of the Peter Millar UGA 10 collection. A lot of the UGA stuff I actually wear on the show here a lot of times is the UGA 10 collection from Peter Millar. It is the classiest Georgia stuff I've seen, and it's only available at the UGA Bookstore. So please make sure you check that out. You can find it online at UGAbookstore.com. Let's wrap up the show. And as we do so, of course, with the spring game on Saturday for Florida, it's a reminder of the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. The trip back there for the Dogs in Jacksonville in October. It takes place 194 days from right now. And listen, we think the weekend's another example of this. Florida's got a long way to go. We think back in Jacksonville for the cocktail party again. Another big win for the Georgia Bulldogs coming there, and we'll do it 194 days from right now. It is our Gator Hater Countdown here on our DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza. Also, I guess a little bit of bad news for the Diamond Dogs here. Another series loss. It's now 2 weekend series in a row. Dropped in SEC play. 2 of 3 dropped to Vanderbilt last week, and 2 of 3 to Kentucky over the weekend here. It's a good Kentucky team. They really hit the ball, and as we were kind of saying on the show on Friday, just a lot of good baseball being played in the SEC right now. But Georgia's part of it, and we'll look forward to seeing them get back their winning ways, and see you tomorrow. Thanks for being with us. And for those of you here on video right now, let's get ready to take some comments here. You can kind of weigh in on anything from the show today. We kind of set ourselves up for a good bit of comments here, so we'll have some fun with that. Bob Walser, to go back to what we were saying, this is on Facebook. We were saying this about the running back situation a moment ago. He says DeAndre Swift's going to be the man this year, and I'm really excited. Really excited about that. Nice words from James Davis. James, appreciate the kind words. Willie Gray says, when you talk about Swift's injury, are you saying growing or growing pains? And I believe it's growing, as the old line from Cheers. I'm dating myself with that reference, but the growing injury. I believe it's the growing situation there for Mr. Swift. Santiago D. Arn says, can't wait to see Elisha Holyfield, Harrion, and Zamir White run with the number one offensive line. They're going to shine. Yeah, we're going to have to wait a little while on Zamir, but I agree with you. All three of those guys are going to be a lot of fun here this week. Brett Page says they played Duck, Duck, Goose. The Gators had a Butch Jones spring game. Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't mind telling you, obviously I'm playing to the crowd here by saying this, but I do legitimately mean this. I am highly suspicious of this notion that you picked teams for the spring game. A, that seems like a waste of time, and B, it all sort of seems designed to sort of, make you feel pretty good about the Felipe Franks situation. So I am highly suspicious of this Florida spring game. The whole thing seems like an orchestrated work. Maybe it did work. Maurice Carter asking if I had a chance to watch the Florida spring game. I saw bits and pieces here and followed the online chatter. And I asked my buddy Eddie if Eddie saw anything that he liked, and he said no. That's kind of a corny dad joke, but that's kind of the situation there. Justin Turner on Facebook says Florida looked as if they took spring games a joke. They have problems, big problem. Yeah, I don't like this notion that you're picking teams, that you're drawing up sides to the spring game. I like Kirby Smart's philosophy here. Let's go ones against ones. Let's find, if you're not good, let's find out right now, so we don't have to waste our time this fall. I like that a whole lot better. D.L. Sutton says he's got a jersey for Eddie. Where do I send it? I'm not sure what our address is. That's probably something I should know. Ryan Green brings up a good point. Trevor Lawrence looked good on Saturday. I think Lawrence going to be the starting quarterback for Clemson. So, obviously there's that Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields comparison that goes on here at one point in time. Lawrence was the number one player in the country. Fields overtook him. Then I believe at the end, Lawrence finally overtook him once again there to sort of finish as the 24/7 Sports Composite number one player in the country. I think that Justin Fields, based on the whispers that we're hearing, is doing just fine at Georgia. But Lawrence comes in, like second play or whatever in the game, throws a 50-yard touchdown pass. I'm not that big of a believer in Kelly Bryant necessarily. I hate to say that, but I'm just really not. I think Lawrence is going to be the quarterback for Clemson. I think he's going to be pretty good. Ryan also asked about over-under for 120 yards for Fields throwing the football. I'm going to go over on that, I think, because I think he's going to play a lot. If you want to give me – and I've always wanted to do this, but I'm not very good at math. Maybe I can get like my buddy Michael, who's more of a degenerate gambler, to help us out with this. I want to do over-unders prop bets for G-Day. I've always wanted to do this, but you got to sort of use some historical precedent to make that happen, and I've never been, just diligent enough to sort of go back and sort of establish this line. But I do think it'd be kind of fun to do some over-under stuff for, various G-Day, competitors. 120 seems like a fairly good number for Justin Fields. I'd have to go back and look at the history to sort of figure that out for myself, but my guess is if you want to set the number at something, Fields probably goes over. I would think that Fromm probably goes under. I think there's a chance that Fromm just doesn't play that much. You give Fields a lot of snaps. I think you probably give Stetson Bennett some, and that may be, kind of the story there. Nick Lurch says, BA, give the address again for the early stuff on Saturday. Okay, so here's how it's going to go down on Saturday. From 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., we're going to be at Bulldog Park, which is a really cool motor home park. It's RVs. It's a place where UGA fans can park their RVs. A very comfortable, really classy sort of spot. Beautiful place to kind of hang out and enjoy that community before the games themselves. Terrific tailgate goes on there. It's 655 Hancock Industrial Way. Once again, that's 655 Hancock Industrial Way in Athens this Saturday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. What Bulldog Park is telling us is David Green also going to be on hand from 11:15 to 11:45. David Pollock going to be there from noon until 12:30. Kevin Butler there from 1:30 until 2 p.m. So a lot of guests on hand there, courtesy of Bulldog Park. we're going to be there as well. And if you'd like to say hello to me, I'd love to do that with you. And if you'd like to get a DawgNation Appreciation T-shirt while we have some supplies, and we're going to try to bring a lot of them, I will try to be there and do that with you. I'm not going to try. I'm going to actually do it. Miriam Martin Corbin asked about taking the shuttle from there to the field. I don't know about that, Miriam. That's a good question. I don't know about that. Scott Gentry said, when did you say Aaron Murray's going to be at the bookstore? Aaron is signing at the bookstore on Friday. Give me a second. I'll pull that back up. Aaron's signing at the bookstore on Friday. I believe it's 5 to 7 p.m. I already closed that read. Let me pull that back up again. All right, Aaron Murray's going to be at the bookstore Friday from 5 to 7 p.m. It's $10, and you get a picture with the it says a free picture is included. $10 from 5 to 7 p.m. for Aaron Murray there at the UGA bookstore. So that's the story on that. Let me pop over to YouTube here. I haven't said hello to the YouTube people. On Thursday, the SEC Country YouTube folks were really getting after me for not doing enough YouTube comments. So let me make sure I keep doing that. Over here on the DawgNation, Dapper Dan talking about some recruiting stuff, talking about Nolan Smith and Owen Popo to that group. He says Bill Norton looks like an NFL Hall of Fame type guy. He said, I personally think we flipped Chris Hinton too. Boy, I'd love that UGA defensive front to represent those names here coming up in the next few years. I think that's going to be really fun. Jacob Mahaffey also thinks that Georgia flips Hinton. That's kind of an exciting thing to think about there. I guess I saw where kind of a busy weekend for Nolan Smith, as Jeff talked about on Friday. He does take the Alabama visit, or at least he was supposed to take that. Apparently, he also showed up at the Florida spring game too. I know a lot of those IMG guys went to that Florida spring game. I'm just not worried about Nolan. I'm just not. If I have a legit reason to, then I'll obviously change. But for now, I'm not really. But the Papo thing on May 1st is certainly interesting. And if I had to guess, and this is a total guess, is not based on reporting, the reason why the date changed maybe from May 5th to May 1st for Papo is, I'm going to guess this is all TV related. It sounds like he wants to do this on TV, and obviously you get more eyeballs on a Tuesday announcement on May 1st than you would a Saturday announcement. Saturday typically the sort of lowest rated day for regular over-the-air television. So my guess is the TV folks that he's doing this with, because I think he made reference to DawgNation, the fact that he wants to do it on television. I'm sure the TV people talked him into do it on Tuesday instead of Saturday. That's what my guess is on that. Brian Kephart on YouTube saying, what are the big-name recruits that are going to be on hand on Saturday? Jeff's got the list working at DawgNation. He's been doing this a lot. A couple of the names that jump off to me, though, are, those two defensive tackles that I think are priorities right now. Really, the only two defensive tackles within the state of Georgia that are priorities for 2019, both expect to be at G-Day. Trayvon Walker is one. Jalen Humphreys is the other. Those are two of my most critical G-Day visitors. It's worth pointing out that Papo will not be at G-Day. He's going to be taking an official visit to Penn State there instead of coming to G-Day. Probably not a great sign that he's not in Athens, although he's visited Athens plenty. So when I think about my G-Day visitor list, Humphreys and Walker are very near the top of my list on that. But Jeff's got the full list that he's been working on. You got the 2020 defensive end, Brian Barisi. He's expected to be there. So you got a nice little list growing here, and Jeff's going to be doing all of that. Jacob Mahaffey says, judging by what Papo has said, I think in the end he got – actually, maybe he's not referencing Papo. I shouldn't say for sure that I know who he's referencing. Brian Kephart says that he's worried that Papo isn't coming. And, after having Ben on the show, Ben Wolk, after having Jeff Sintel on this multiple times, I just think that the May 1st deal here is just the next domino to fall. This is a full December story. I mean, take Quay Walker, for instance. I mean, if we drew out the Quay Walker timeline here, and we could do the same thing for Brenton Cox, I guess. Anderson maybe not quite as much. I mean, even when Anderson decommitted, it was a huge deal, but I think there was always a decent level of confidence about Anderson, I think. Maybe I'm misremembering that. But, when Brenton Cox, chose Ohio State, huge deal. giving a lot of time to Alabama, including a big visit there in December, big deal. Saban coming to Stockbridge to spend some time with Brenton Cox. I mean, these timelines, took a lot of twists and turns along the way. That's certainly true with Quay Walker. I mean, how many times here on DawgNation Daily was Quay Walker just completely written off? Oh, he's Auburn. He's all Auburn. It's done. And then it's, Alabama, it's done. And then it's Tennessee, it's done. I mean, how many times did that happen? And ultimately he's all dog there at the end. The Tennessee hat's still orbiting the earth somewhere, I think. So I think my two opinions about Owen Pappoe are this. I think he is a big-time need for Georgia. I mean, I am not going to entertain this thought of, Georgia's got Channing Tindall and Georgia's got Quay Walker. It doesn't need, Owen Pappoe anymore or as much anymore. I'm not entertaining that. I think that he's a generational type talent. I think Georgia really needs him. And I think no matter what happens on May 1st, come December, there's a really good chance that Georgia gets him. And Mahaffey says he was referencing Pappoe. Okay, so yeah, all right. Thank you, Jacob. Sorry about that. So yeah, that's kind of my thought on Pappoe. I think that Georgia really needs him. I'm not giving up at all, no matter what he says on May 1st. I think it's a long time before December, and that's going to be a recruitment worth watching. Back on Facebook, Maurice Carter says, I think when Pappoe set the date for his commitment, he already made his choice. All this talk about Auburn's late push is totally irrelevant because he's had his mind made up where he wants to go for a while now. I guess the only thing about the he's had his mind made up for a while now narrative is that may be true. A lot of times the public demeanor, the private behavior are completely different when it comes to recruits, but it's worth pointing out here this is very different. Very, very different because, I mean, how many schools have been thought to be his leaders somewhere along the way? I thought Jeff said this great the other day. For a while it was Florida State. I mean, there was a time when Pappoe to Florida State seemed like something close to a given. Then it's, other schools, Clemson in the mix. He's got a top three that includes Nebraska, strangely enough. You've had sort of all this going on. Georgia has been the one constant in there with that other school. It's always been some other school in Georgia. So the Auburn edition here, maybe not all that different from that, but he doesn't really strike me as the kind of kid who's, quote, had his mind made up for a while now. It seems like there's some public movement here that would seem to sort of suggest indecision more so than sort of rock solid decision. Miriam Martin Corbin says there are going to be games played between May 1st and December. If Auburn's not doing well, we will be. That looks a lot different, I would think. Yeah, I just think that Georgia's a tough school to say no to right now. And obviously for those of us who, care about this subject, this is a really good thing to have said about your school. But, my guess is that Georgia has another really good season in 2018. I don't know if it gets back to college football play. I think it's got a really good chance too. I think this notion that it's some huge underdog to Alabama this season is ludicrous. But overall, it's going to be a really good year for Georgia, pointing to an even better year in 2019, regardless of what the results are this season. I just think we're at a point in time where Georgia's hard to say no to. Auburn's makes a strong pitch. They signed 16 four-star players for 2018, but Georgia's tough to say no to, and that's ultimately, I think, what's going to come down to. Yeah, maybe the relationship with Travis Williams, who Benjamin Wolk on our program described as really strong, maybe that does hold some sway for right now. But ultimately, what is it about Georgia that's not to like here? We're getting ready to wrap up, by the way, too. Let me take a couple more. Will Puckett says, don't get me wrong, I want Pappoe. Let me get the rest of this comment. Will says, I want Pappoe. But if he does go to Auburn, they'll be under a quarterback search after Stidham goes to the draft. Offense going to struggle after getting a new quarterback and trying to develop, one. Yeah, I think that's kind of an underrated story about Auburn right now is what happens to them after Jared Stidham, because I don't think that right now Joey Gatewood or Malik Willis look like the next in line there at the Auburn quarterback position. Malzahn struggles when he doesn't have a good quarterback. Maybe the Knicks kid, the legacy, maybe he's a quarterback of the future type guy. The truth is I don't really know that much about his evaluation as a player, but there is no lineage of quarterbacks in place right now at Auburn. I think that's a really fair point. One more time over to YouTube before we say goodbye here. Tapper Dan says, in response to me saying that Auburn signed 16 four-star guys a year ago, he says we're going to have 16 five-star guys pretty soon. Yeah, that is well on its way to happening. Steve Burnett says that there's the report that the announcement got moved up because of Grayson's spring practice schedule. Apparently, this is from 24/7. There's nothing significant about the move from May 5th to May 1st as far as the school to attend. I would certainly agree with that. I don't think there's a school-related deal here. You are going to get more eyeballs on it, though, on a Tuesday as opposed to a Saturday. If indeed they want to put it on TV, which I believe he said he wanted to, you're going to get more eyeballs on that on a Tuesday instead of a Saturday. I also saw some message board posts. I don't even know this is true because Georgia's not in the mix for this guy, but Wanya Morris is also expected to announce his date or his commitment on the same date. Am I right about that? Maybe I'm not, but Jacob Mahaffey says we got to change the pronunciation back to Popo. I will say Popo is a lot easier to say, and I want the young man to have his name pronounced the way he wants it pronounced, but Popo is much easier to say. I will certainly grant you on that. It's also a little bit true with, like, come to find out it's Jamari Salyer, not Sawyer. Salyer is also a little harder to say. Now, I got a big, thick, fat tongue, so there are a lot of words that are hard for me to say, but I do agree that Popo sort of rolls off the tongue a lot more than Peppo does. But as I said, I want Owen to have his name pronounced the way that he wants it. And I'd love to see that Peppo stitch on the back of a red jersey here pretty soon, too. All right, thank you all very much. Always appreciate you being with us. Make plans to be with us if you can. 6 p.m. tomorrow, Marlowe's Brookhaven. We've got DawgNation Appreciation shirts to give away there. And then on Saturday, before the game at Bulldog Park, after the game at the UJ Bookstore. It's going to be a busy week for us. Huge announcement also coming, I think, tomorrow about a special guest that's going to be with us for the post-game show at the UJ Bookstore. So we're going to be loaded this week. I'll tell you all about that. Y'all have a great day. 3 p.m. this afternoon for SEC Country Live. Audio version of our program hitting all the various podcast channels very soon, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. And back here again tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., for another episode of DawgNation Daily Live, presented by Marco's Pizza. We'll see you then.